We buy organic vegetables wrapped in plastic. We subscribe to meal kits that cost $40 and contain ingredients we could have bought ourselves for $12. We watch cooking videos on our phones while eating takeout. Meanwhile, your grandmother fed a family of 6 on a single income, wasted almost nothing, and somehow made it look easy. What our grandmas understood about food that we forgot. Cooking from scratch wasn't a trend. Your grandmother didn't announce on social media that she was cooking from scratch tonight, because cooking from scratch was just called cooking. There was no alternative. Box mixes existed by the 1970s, and frozen dinners had been around since the 1950s, but these were convenience items for emergencies or special occasions, not the default setting. She made bread because buying bread more than once or twice a week wasn't economical. She made soup because that's what you did with leftover vegetables and bones. She made cake for birthdays using flour, sugar, eggs, and butter because cake mix, while available, cost more than the ingredients did separately, and the homemade version tasted better anyway. The knowledge required for this wasn't specialized. It was common. Most women learned to cook from their mothers, who learned from their mothers. The techniques passed down through demonstration, not through Pinterest boards or YouTube tutorials. You watched, you helped, you eventually did it yourself. She knew how to make white sauce without looking at a recipe because she'd made it hundreds of times. She knew the ratio of flour to butter to milk by feel. She understood that you cooked the flour in the butter first to eliminate the raw taste, then added milk gradually while stirring to prevent lumps. This wasn't impressive knowledge. It was basic competence. She could roast a chicken without a thermometer, judging doneness by how the leg moved in the socket and whether the juices ran clear. She knew pie dough was ready when it looked like coarse crumbs, and she knew it was overworked when it got sticky and tough. These assessments came from experience, not from following detailed instructions. This wasn't virtuous or impressive. It was normal. Nobody got praised for making dinner from basic ingredients because everyone did it. The skill level expected of an average home cook was significantly higher than it is today. But the cultural acknowledgement of that skill was lower because it was ubiquitous. Nothing went to waste. The modern concept of food waste would have seemed insane to your grandmother. Throwing away food meant throwing away money, and throwing away money was morally wrong. This wasn't environmental consciousness. It was economics and habit. Vegetable scraps became stock. Stale bread became stuffing, bread pudding, or breadcrumbs. Meat bones simmered into broth. Fat got saved for cooking. Coffee grounds went into the garden. Leftover coffee got reheated or turned into iced coffee, not poured down the sink. Leftovers weren't reluctantly eaten or eventually thrown out. They were planned for. Monday's roast chicken became Tuesday's chicken salad, Wednesday's chicken soup, and Thursday's chicken pot pie. The carcass made stock on Friday. Nothing remained. Produce got eaten in order of what would spoil first. Tomatoes before they got soft. Lettuce before it wilted. Bananas that were getting brown became banana bread. Apples that weren't quite right for eating fresh went into applesauce or pie. There was a system, and it worked. The refrigerator was organized so you could see what needed to be used. The pantry was organized by expiration date, with older items in front. Food storage wasn't an afterthought, it was part of the process. My mother would save bacon grease in a jar by the stove and use it to flavor green beans or fry eggs, recalls Helen Martinez from New Mexico. I thought it was disgusting when I was younger. Now I do the same thing and can't believe I ever bought vegetable oil for everything. Seasonal eating wasn't a philosophy. Your grandmother ate strawberries in June because that's when strawberries were available. She ate butternut squash in October because that's when it was harvested. She didn't make a moral choice to eat seasonally. The modern grocery system that provides everything year-round didn't exist yet. This meant the food was better. Strawberries in June, grown locally and picked ripe, taste completely different from strawberries in January that were grown in another hemisphere and picked green to survive shipping. Tomatoes in August are a different food than tomatoes in February. It also meant variety across the year. Summer meant fresh corn, cucumbers, tomatoes, berries. Fall brought apples, pears, root vegetables, squash. Winter was stored apples, potatoes, canned goods, citrus. Spring brought asparagus, peas, early greens. The meals changed with the calendar. This seasonal rotation prevented boredom while creating anticipation. The first fresh corn of summer was an event. The first apple cider in fall meant something. You couldn't have these things whenever you wanted them, so having them when they arrived felt special. Preserving the harvest extended the season. Strawberries became jam, tomatoes got canned, cucumbers turned into pickles, peaches were frozen or preserved in syrup. This allowed summer's abundance to carry through winter, but the preserved version never pretended to be the fresh version. The loss of seasonal eating means we can have mediocre versions of everything all the time instead of excellent versions of specific things at specific times. Your grandmother would have found this trade baffling. Meal planning happened weekly. Grocery shopping occurred once a week, sometimes less often. This meant planning every meal for the week, checking what you already had, making a detailed list, and sticking to it. Running back to the store for a forgotten ingredient wasn't convenient, so it didn't happen. The weekly shop required knowing exactly what meals would be cooked, when they'd be cooked, and what ingredients were needed. It required checking the pantry and refrigerator inventory before leaving the house. It required understanding what could be purchased in bulk versus what needed to be fresh. This system eliminated impulse purchases and reduced food waste. You bought what you needed for specific meals. You didn't buy ingredients you might use someday. You didn't grab items because they looked good without having a plan for them. The meal rotation often ran on a schedule. Monday was meatloaf. Tuesday used Monday's leftovers. Wednesday was spaghetti. Thursday was pork chops. Friday was fish or something meatless. Saturday used up odds and ends. Sunday was a roast. This predictability made planning easier and ensured variety across the week. The shopping list was organized by store layout to minimize backtracking. Produce first, then dairy, then meat, then dry goods. She knew which aisle everything was in and shopped efficiently. A full week's grocery shopping could be completed in under an hour because the list was thorough and the route was planned. Price comparison happened in your grandmother's head. She knew what things cost at different stores. She knew which items were worth buying when on sale. She knew the price per pound of different cuts of meat and could calculate which provided better value. Store loyalty came from price and quality, not from rewards programs or marketing. She also knew how to substitute ingredients based on what was available or on sale. If chicken was expensive that week, pork chops replaced it in the meal plan. If green beans were looking sad, she bought broccoli instead. The flexibility came from understanding how meals worked, not from rigidly following recipes. Protein was a side dish. Modern restaurant portions treat protein as the main event, with a massive piece of meat or fish dominating the plate. Your grandmother's dinner plates looked different. The protein was present, but not dominant. The meal balanced across categories. A typical dinner might include a small portion of meat, a starch like potatoes or rice, 2 vegetables, and bread. The meat provided flavor and some nutrition, but it wasn't the centerpiece. The meal cost less this way, and it was probably healthier, though that wasn't the driving concern. Ground beef got stretched with breadcrumbs, rice, or vegetables. A pound of hamburger that would now serve 2 or 3 people could be extended into a casserole that fed 6. Chicken was purchased whole and butchered at home, with each part used for different purposes. Expensive cuts of meat were saved for special occasions. Beans, eggs, and cheese provided protein on days when meat was too expensive or unnecessary. A bean soup with ham hock used a tiny amount of meat to flavor a large pot of protein-rich food. Scrambled eggs with cheese and toast made a complete dinner that cost pennies per serving. This approach worked nutritionally and economically. It reduced food costs significantly while providing adequate nutrition. It also reduced food waste, because smaller portions of protein meant less likely to have uneaten meat left on plates or in the refrigerator. Home cooking skills were comprehensive. Your grandmother could do things in a kitchen that would seem advanced or specialized today. She could break down a whole chicken. She could make pie crust from scratch. She could can vegetables safely. She could make bread without a recipe. These weren't exceptional skills, they were normal. She understood heat and timing through experience, not through reading recipes. She knew when something was done by looking at it, smelling it, touching it. She could adjust seasonings by taste, not by measuring. The knowledge was practical and physical, not theoretical. Recipes existed, but functioned as guidelines, not rigid instructions. She'd modify based on what she had available, what her family liked, what was in season. The ability to improvise came from understanding how ingredients behaved and how flavors combined. Equipment was minimal. She accomplished everything with a few good pots and pans, basic utensils, and simple appliances. No food processor, no stand mixer, no instant pot, no air fryer. The tools were simple, reliable, and lasted decades. Knife skills came from daily practice. She chopped vegetables for every meal, using the same knife for years until it was worn down from sharpening. The speed came not from studying technique, but from repetition. After chopping onions 1,000 times, you get fast at chopping onions. Convenience foods were actually inconvenient. The great irony is that the convenience foods that replaced home cooking often created more work, more expense, and more complication than the traditional methods. Your grandmother's soup took 20 minutes of active work and then simmered while she did other things. Modern convenient soup comes in a can, costs more per serving, tastes worse, contains questionable ingredients, and has to be stored and eventually thrown out if not used. The convenience is debatable. Her bread required mixing ingredients and waiting for rising, but the actual hands-on time was minimal. The result was far superior to store-bought, and it cost a fraction of the price. Modern bread is convenient if you define convenience as not having to wait, but inconvenient if you define it as requiring multiple trips to the store per week and spending more money for an inferior product. The convenience food industry convinced several generations that cooking from scratch was difficult, time-consuming, and required special skills. This was marketing, not truth. Your grandmother knew cooking wasn't difficult because she did it every day without special training or exceptional ability. Appetites were calibrated differently. People ate less, and they ate less frequently. 3 meals a day was standard. Snacking between meals was minimal. You ate at meal times, and you ate what was served, and that was it until the next meal. Portion sizes were smaller across the board. Restaurant portions have increased dramatically over the past 50 years. Home-cooked portions have followed. Your grandmother's dinner plates were often 9 inches in diameter. Modern dinner plates are 12 inches or larger. The same amount of food looks sparse on a larger plate, so we serve more food. Hunger was allowed to develop before meals. You didn't eat every time you felt slightly hungry. You waited until mealtime. This made the meals more satisfying and prevented the constant low-level snacking that has become normal. The snack food industry, as we know it, barely existed. Chips and cookies were occasional treats, not daily staples. Soda was for special occasions. The idea of constantly having food and drinks available throughout the day would have seemed strange and unhealthy. Children who claimed they were hungry between meals got told to wait for dinner. This wasn't cruel, it was normal. The expectation was that you'd be hungry at mealtime, eat a proper meal, and then not be hungry again until the next mealtime. Meat wasn't the default. Despite the previous section about protein as a side dish, this deserves its own focus. Many of your grandmother's meals contained no meat at all, and this was completely normal and unremarkable. Monday might be meatloaf. Tuesday used the leftovers. Wednesday was spaghetti with marinara sauce and no meat. Thursday was grilled cheese and tomato soup. Friday was tuna casserole or fish if you were Catholic. Saturday was scrambled eggs and toast. Sunday was pot roast. 3 of those 7 days had no meat or minimal meat. This happened for economic reasons, not ethical ones. Meat was expensive. Eggs, cheese, and beans were cheap. A meal without meat cost significantly less than a meal with meat. Feeding a family of 6 on a limited budget required meatless meals several times a week. These meals didn't try to replace meat with fake meat. They were designed around other proteins and didn't pretend to be something they weren't. Red beans and rice tasted like red beans and rice, not like a sad attempt at beef. Pasta with marinara sauce was satisfying on its own terms. The modern idea that a meal isn't complete without meat would have seemed both expensive and unnecessary. Your grandmother understood that a well-balanced meatless meal could be filling, nutritious, and delicious without requiring any substitutions or apologies. The kitchen was the heart of the home. Not in the metaphorical sense that gets written about in home design magazines, but in the practical sense that the kitchen was where the work happened, where people gathered, and where the daily rhythm of life was maintained. Breakfast got cooked, lunches got packed, dinner got prepared, dishes got washed, homework happened at the kitchen table, conversations occurred while vegetables were being chopped. The kitchen was in constant use because the work of feeding a family happened there multiple times every day. This meant the kitchen needed to be functional, not beautiful. Counters needed to be clear for work surfaces. Storage needed to be accessible. Everything had a specific place because the room was used too much for clutter or disorganization to be tolerable. The kitchen was also a teaching space. Children learned to cook by helping in the kitchen, not by being sent to cooking classes. They learned by measuring ingredients, stirring pots, setting the table, washing dishes. The skills transferred through proximity and practice. Meals happened at consistent times. Dinner was at 6 or 5:30, or whatever time worked for the family's schedule, but it happened at that time every day. This consistency created structure and made planning possible. You knew when meals would occur, so you could prepare accordingly. Quality came from ingredients, not equipment. Your grandmother made excellent food with basic equipment and good ingredients. Modern cooking culture has inverted this, focusing on expensive equipment while accepting mediocre ingredients. She used cast iron skillets that lasted decades, simple pots with heavy bottoms, a few good knives that got sharpened regularly. These tools worked well because they were well made and well maintained, not because they were numerous or expensive. The ingredients mattered more. Fresh vegetables from the garden or the farmer's market, meat from the butcher, dairy from the local dairy. The quality of the raw ingredients determined the quality of the final dish more than technique or equipment. This is backwards from how many people cook now. We buy expensive appliances and specialty tools while accepting vegetables that were picked weeks ago and shipped across the country. We own 15 different pans, but buy pre-shredded cheese that costs twice as much as the block and tastes like plastic. Your grandmother would have been baffled by a kitchen full of devices that each do one specific thing. A spiralizer for vegetables, an avocado slicer, a special tool for removing strawberry tops. She used a knife, and the knife worked fine. Time was different. The complaint that nobody has time to cook anymore would have confused your grandmother. She had less time, not more. She often worked either outside the home or running the household, which was substantial work itself. She had more children. She had less help from her partner, if she had a partner. And yet, she cooked 3 meals a day. The difference wasn't time. It was priority and efficiency. Cooking was non-negotiable, so time got allocated to it. It wasn't something she did when she felt like it, or when she had extra time. It was part of the daily structure. The efficiency came from practice and routine. When you make the same types of meals repeatedly, you get faster. When your kitchen is organized logically, You waste less time looking for things. When you plan ahead, you don't waste time making decisions at the last minute. Modern time scarcity is real, but it's also partly a function of how we've chosen to structure our lives and our priorities. We have time for scrolling social media, but not for chopping vegetables. We have time for watching cooking shows, but not for actually cooking. Your grandmother didn't have a choice about whether to cook, so she made it work. We have choices, and we've chosen convenience over the actual benefits that home cooking provided. The social aspect was built in. Meals happened at the table with the family present. This wasn't a special occasion or a conscious choice to have family dinner night. It was just how eating happened. The meal was communal by default. This meant everyone ate the same thing. There were no individualized meals, no separate kids' menu, no accommodations for pickiness beyond reasonable limits. What got cooked was what everyone ate. You could skip items you didn't like, but an alternative meal wasn't provided. The conversation happened naturally because everyone was present and had nowhere else to be. The TV wasn't on. Phones didn't exist. The meal provided a built-in time and place for the family to interact and communicate. This wasn't always peaceful or pleasant. Families have conflicts, but the regular structure of shared meals created a framework for communication and connection that many families now lack because everyone eats at different times, in different places, consuming different foods. Children learn table manners, conversation skills, and family stories through these shared meals. The cultural transmission happened passively through participation, not through formal instruction. Your grandmother wasn't a better person than you. She wasn't more virtuous, more patient, or more talented. She operated in a different system, with different constraints and different options. The food knowledge she had was common knowledge, shared across most of her generation. That knowledge has largely been lost, not because we're worse people, but because the food system changed in ways that made traditional skills seem unnecessary. The convenience food industry promised to make life easier and did make some things easier. But we lost significant knowledge, skill, and food quality in the exchange. The good news is that the knowledge isn't gone, just uncommon. People still know how to cook from scratch, plan meals, preserve food, minimize waste. Your grandmother might not be around to teach you anymore, but the information exists. The question is whether we think it's worth recovering. The skills that seemed like basic competence to her generation now seem like exceptional ability. That shift tells you something about what we've lost and what we might want to recover. If this reminded you of your own grandmother's kitchen and the meals she made, hit that like button and subscribe for more looks back at the practical wisdom that somehow became uncommon knowledge. What did your grandmother cook that you wish you could make? Share it in the comments.